The easiest way to produce a garland is really literally just laying foliage down on the table. So I'm using soft Ruscus here to start with. You can just lay that. I normally tend to cut the end pieces that are a little bit ugly, cut those off and dispose of those. So just cutting that piece off. Usually the soft Ruscus comes in multiples of about 5 stems per bunch. It is done on a weighted basis, so you tend to find the longer the stem you buy, the slightly less stems you get per bunch. Usually though it's between 4 and 6. This bunch has actually got 5 and it's 120 centimetre stem length that I'm using. Okay, I'm going to add in some eucalyptus at this point. Now I'm going to use Eucalyptus cinerea. Probably I would say one of the greyer tones of eucalyptus that we get, apart from baby blue. It has the sort of slightly old-fashioned penny-shaped leaf, slightly rounded leaf. It's also one of the most fragrant of the eucalyptus. If you take one of the leaves and you crush it in your hand, the eucalyptus oil released in the leaf is absolutely lovely, really aromatic, and it actually is supposed to have soothing effects. So by popping eucalyptus into a bridal bouquet or something where perhaps somebody is slightly stressed about the event, it's supposed to help to soothe them. Those and lavender together are supposed to be very soothing. So again, I'm cutting off the end of the stalks of the eucalyptus, just so we don't have those unseemly sort of nasty end pieces. I'll just move that out of the way slightly so you can see what I'm doing. So starting with the eucalyptus, and then we're threading the soft Ruscus around that. Now the lovely thing about the soft Ruscus is it's very pliable. You can manipulate it so that it will bend around the other stems. So as you can see, literally just winding it round and through. And add the eucalyptus as you go along. So you're getting much more of a slightly more textured garland, shall we say. And obviously you can add any type of foliage that you want to this. Olive branches work very well. They last relatively well out of water for a little while. What I would suggest is if you make this up the day or 2 days before the event, I'd recommend that you line a cardboard box with cellophane, spray water on top of the cellophane into the box, then lay the garland in that, cover it with cellophane and then put the lid of the box on, and you can store that somewhere cold for a couple of 3 days and it'll be fine. Okay, so the soft Ruscus is one of the foliages foliage that does last really well out of water. So absolutely perfect for garland work. Oops, cut the wrong piece off there. And then adding some more in. Now and again, once you get to the point where you've got quite a few stems tied together, I'm just going to tie those with some garden string. Now I use garden string simply because, or twine, simply because it is biodegradable. Also the dark green you can't really see against the foliage, so that works quite well. I'm just going to tie that piece in as well. So when you do have to throw it away at the end of the event, you can throw the whole lot out quite happily, knowing that there's no wire involved that's not going to decompose. Just to show you, that's actually, I am trying quite hard to pull that apart. You can see it's not coming apart, so it's nice and secure, so you could hang that quite happily. And in the same way it would quite happily sit on a table as well. So I'm only going to do a small amount here because I've actually quite stuck for space in this little corner. So another option of decorating would be perhaps to put some little tiny jars here. I'm just going to tuck those in between the garlands. And they're literally just a pink little milk bottle which was just decorated with some raffia. Just placing those in strategic little positions along the garland. Now what you might find is you need to add some extra as you go along. There's no reason why you can't do that. Just make sure that it looks aesthetically pleasing really. And just adding, I have gone quite symmetrical here, but if you want to go random, I'd probably group a couple, then perhaps one, and then another couple or something like that, rather than being quite so symmetrical. I'm a little bit old school, I'm afraid. My brain does balance and symmetry rather than anything too random. Okay, so I'm going to pop some roses in this one. Now this rose variety that I'm using here is one called Sealy. And the other one that I'm using, which is rather pretty, that one's called Fragrant For You. And I'm just cutting that out with the cellophane. Now these ones we've had in water for some time, so they have actually opened quite a little bit, which is not a bad thing if you've got just a single bloom that you're putting into a jar, because they look a little bit more interesting. When they're tight buds, they don't necessarily show themselves off to their full advantage. I'm slitting the stem up as I put them into the jars. And then I'm going to also add some pieces of the hydrangea as well. Hydrangea is really interesting because I've described it to customers before as almost like a piece of broccoli. You know how when you buy your floret of broccoli, you cut lots of little pieces off before you boil it to eat. Well, hydrangea is very similar in the respect that you get the little floret and then you get little tiny pieces you can break off. So although hydrangea initially appears to be quite an expensive flower to purchase, it's actually very cost effective because you can break it down into several little pieces. So yeah. Okay, so just popped a few little pieces of hydrangea into the rest of those little jars, and then I'm also going to pop some little tiny pieces of gyp just to add a little bit of interest to the little arrangements. So I've literally used one stem of Gypsophila to create what I've done so far. I've used half a bunch of Eucalyptus Cinerea, and I've used half a bunch of soft Ruscus, and I would say that's given us a good metre, if not just over a metre. Yeah. So yeah, and it's quite a thick garland as well. It's not been mean there at all. So I'll pop these little beasties back again. So you could group sort of 3 together, and then another sort of 3 together if you wanted to do a group situation rather than a single. But yeah, so that shows you how you can pop a garland together.